Okay.
Our guest today is Julien Feldman,
Wonderful.
and he's going to be discussing what's new at the EMSB, the English Montreal School Board.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
With a youth and adult sector population of more than 50,000 students, the English Montreal School Board is the largest English public school board in Quebec. The MSB network consists of 77 schools and centers. Julien's Ward 3 encompasses 11 schools, including Roslyn Elementary, Westmont Park Elementary, and Westmont High School. A former journalist who is a Queen's MBA graduate, Julien was first elected to the school board's Council of Commissioners in 2007. He was just re-elected, I guess what you could call a rather strange COVID election last fall. He was named Personality of the Year by Quebec's Ligue d'Action Civique in 2018. And this is the first time that an Anglo-Quebecer has been honored by this policy think tank. They specialize in reforming municipal politics. Julien believes that the scourge of our age, being toxic partisan politics, is a real problem that needs fixing. In 2019, with a few other like-minded commissioners, he organized a nonpartisan group of commissioners which named lawyer Joe Ortona as its coordinator. As chairman of the school board's Human Resources Committee, Julien was called on to organize the school board's legal strategy against Quebec's Bill 21, a law that challenges the Canadian Charter of Rights and is also the government's backdoor attempt to dismantle Section 23 of the Canadian Charter, which allows linguistic minority school boards to exist in Quebec. Excuse me. Some of you may remember the Quebec government placing the English School Board under trusteeship just prior to the COVID lockdown. Julien's group of commissioners came roaring back, regaining control of the school board, naming Joe Ortona the chairman, and winning their case against Bill 21 in Superior Court, obtaining a court injunction also against Bill 40, which is a law intended to abolish democratically elected school boards. With that, I'm going to welcome Julien to grace us with his wisdom and fill us with all kinds of interesting tales over the next 20 minutes. I'll give the floor to you, Julien.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And Glenn, thanks for that summary of the recent and very dizzying events at the school board. As elected commissioners, we've basically been trying to steer the ship through some extremely choppy waters during the last 5 years. Glenn, you touched on some of the governance issues commissioners have had to resolve, but that was really nothing compared to the last 2 or even 3 years. So since 2019, we've been managing very serious challenges all at once. It's crisis management pretty much nonstop. Mike Cohen, who's here with us today, is on the front lines of that every single day, doing a great job, by the way. And first, I think I should touch on how the pandemic has affected thousands of families whose kids attend our public schools. And after that, I want to touch on a few issues to explain how a public school board works and some of the challenges we face in maintaining our top ranking in Quebec for graduating bilingual students. Then I'll take questions. First, some information about my district, Ward 3, and the schools. We have elementary schools, high schools. We also have what we call Section 240 schools that serve the entire region of the West End. So on the district, actually, Ward 3 runs from University all the way over to the border of Westmont and NDG by the, essentially the Décarie. Goes south all the way to the Aqueduct in Verdun, so includes St. Henry, all of the southwest, St. Henry, Point St. Charles, and it goes west. In fact, the western boundary is almost goes along the 20, almost hits Montreal West. So in that area, we have FACE, the art school, which is the old high school of Montreal. It's on University. There's, of course, Westmount High. There's a Royal West, which is a 240 high performance school in Montreal West. Royal Vale and NDG, which is a science and math oriented school. There's Roslyn, the premier French Immersion School, the EMSB, Westmont Park Elementary, which serves a lot of international students. St. Gabriel, which is down on Wellington and Point St. Charles. In fact, serves a lot of parents and their children, those who grew up in Westmont, and they moved down the hill to Point St. Charles. There's James Ling High School in St. Henry. And also we have a number of outreach schools in the Southwest, Elizabeth, Options, Vesna, and Venture. So just to be put a fine point on it, school boards run like town councils. Commissioners are elected like town councilors. The main difference is that we hire a specialized chief executive, unlike towns like Westmont, who elect the mayor as their chief executive. But the administrator, our director general, is still accountable to policies voted by the Council of Commissioners. So I want to talk, a lot about COVID-19 actually, because it's a crisis that's still going on, still affects our schools, still affects thousands of students and families. And if you think back, it was in March 2020 that the EMSB first kind of woke up to this crisis. And the first thing that we did, first thing our administrators did, was to cancel school trips, mainly to Italy. I think one of the only school boards in Quebec that did this, but we were worried that hundreds of students could end up being stranded if airports closed. And if you remember, we went into lockdown in Quebec on March 12th, and a lot of fear then spread through the school system, and the Quebec government essentially shut down schools. Now that decision was debated a lot because it inflicted a lot of hardship on families and parents at home. If you can imagine kids at home with nothing to do. And in fact, the EMSB at this time was still under trusteeship, and there was nothing that elected representatives could do to alleviate any of that hardship faced by our community. So eventually we got out of trusteeship. And the first thing we did as a council, and led by our chairman, Joe Ortona, was to set a goal that we would do everything we could to keep schools open. I think it was our best decision that we made throughout the whole COVID crisis. It was a struggle, though. It was very much a struggle to keep schools open. One of the main decisions we took was to spend $2 million to equip every single classroom in the school board with air purifiers, which turned into a political saga because the government was not interested. They didn't want to get into that. They didn't want to spend the money. They downplayed it. They poo-pooed it. And in fact, this is when Bill 40 came into force, which essentially wiped out the elected school boards of, about 75 school boards across Quebec, with the exception of the English school boards, because we managed to get a court injunction against Premier Legault's Bill 40. And so we continued running the school board. Can you hear me all right?
We're good.
We hear
yes,
you.
no
We hear you
problem.
very well. Yeah.
Sometimes I get, okay. Yeah, so there were a lot of controversies in the National Assembly. There were, even scandals about air quality testing at the Minister of Education. And if you recall, because school boards were essentially abolished, other than the English ones, it meant that all decisions were being made centrally in the minister's office or in the premier's office. And so as things turned out, only the English school boards had air purifiers in classrooms. And, I think the general idea was not only are air purifiers very effective in an airborne pandemic, but it certainly squared with our goal of keeping schools open and also ensuring our community of parents and students as well, that we were going to do everything in our power to keep schools open, and then we would show them and try and create confidence by, essentially showing that we're going to put our money where our mouths are. We're going to protect them using air purifiers, class bubbles, and all those other mechanisms that were developed by our administrators. At one point during the pandemic, if you recall, the premier ordered an end to class bubbles. He wanted to turn the page on the pandemic, and at the English School Board, we became somewhat dissenting on that issue, because I think public health officials were saying, no, it's not the right time to do that. Maybe things look different from Quebec City, but in Montreal didn't look like a wise decision. And there was actually a revolt that developed at Westmont High among students, parents, at the governing board. I brought their concerns to our council, and then it spread to all the English school boards in Quebec. And what was interesting is that we then invoked the authority of Section 23 of the Charter. That's the section which gives English school boards and linguistic minority school boards authority to manage their own public school systems. And there was a bit of back and forth between school boards and the premier, but eventually the premier backed down, and bubbles and COVID measures stayed in place across Quebec. So that was a big victory, I think, for this district, for Westmount High, and also for English school boards in general, that they successfully used their tools, their legal powers with the Quebec government. And for the EMSB, we had only recently been in trusteeship. So for a lot of us, we felt that this was the point where the school board the council got its mojo back, that we felt that we were fully in control as elected officials, and that we were making decisions in the best interest of our community. So I think that was a sort of a red letter day for the school board during COVID. Yeah, I think that fundamentally, Premier Legault learned on that day that we will stand up for our community. Public health, it makes a lot of sense, but there are many other issues that are touched by Section 23 of the Charter, where we have autonomy to manage the school board. It could extend to things like textbooks. It could extend to things like Bill 21. And, I'll just touch on Bill 21 as well. So back in 2019, we started seeing where CAC was going with the old PQ Charter of Values. And we started having conversations at the school board. At the time, I was chairman of the Human Resources Committee, and I held public hearings at the school board office. There were several hundred people who attended. There were many dozens of submissions to the public hearings at that time. And we spent a year in a process, and also had long debates at the council, public debates. And eventually it boiled down to a final vote. And we voted to challenge Bill 21 in court. For me, it was very dramatic when the final vote, I think the vote was, I can't remember, but I think it was 7-5, 7-4. I was not, during the debate, I never felt assured that it was going to pass or not. But, the history shows that it was a wise decision. We won a case at Superior Court. It was the wording by the judge was very historic. It will do a lot to protect English school boards in the future. But there were consequences. The Quebec government, and this all happened. We actually filed our Bill 21 lawsuit during not the recent federal election, but the one before that. So I believe that would have been 20, can't remember what year it was, but I guess it would have been 4 years ago, so 2018 maybe. We didn't announce it. We just deposited it in the court near, I think, the last couple of weeks of the federal election campaign. And it was many weeks before the government discovered that there was a lawsuit against Bill 21, and they reacted very severely and very swiftly, and they put the school board under trusteeship. You know, and they made all sorts of gave all sorts of reasons why the school board should be under trusteeship. You know, maybe there were issues obviously at the English School Board, but fundamentally, Legault was apoplectic about our challenge to Bill 21, and he had the power under the Education Act to put us under trusteeship, and he did. So we were under trusteeship for a year. I think it was actually an important year because a lot of things got done at the school board. There was a beginning of reorganization, I think overdue, of the administration. The trustee was Marlene Jennings, who's now who's now chair at QCGN, the Anglophone Group Federation. Bylaws were rewritten. There was kind of an uneasy relationship between the council, you know, looking back now, between the council and the trustee. Fundamentally, the trustee worked for the Quebec government, and I think that elected officials felt that the government was undermining the rights of the community, you know, not through no fault of the trustee personally. That was the job. But one thing the government did not calculate was that they would not be able to have any control over our Bill 21 lawsuit, because there was some worry that they would try and end the lawsuit once they had control of the decision-making at the school board. But of course, that would create a unconstitutional or a constitutional conflict because of Section 23 of the Charter. The Quebec government cannot exercise control or make decisions on behalf of the community under the Charter. Section 23 of the Charter, that's reserved to the representatives, and that means the elected members of the Council of Commissioners. So we retained control over our Bill 21 lawsuit. We continued, we pressed it forward. Bill 40 came up. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic. The government abolished the school boards, but the English school boards, as I previously said, obtained an injunction in Superior Court, and we continued as we went. The other English school boards remained in control. We were under trusteeship with partial control until the trusteeship ended. At the very end of the trusteeship, I think there were some nervous times when the government wanted to appoint its own administrator for post trusteeship, its own director general. The council at that point objected. This was a decision that's really covered by Section 23. It's a decision that can only be made by elected representatives in the community under Section 23. And we objected and firmly refused. And eventually the government backed down, and subsequently we named a new director general, Nick Talafos, who some people may know was formerly the principal of Roslyn School. Great educator, great administrator. He's the point guy who's you know, leading the reorganization of the school board today. I just want to touch on the objectives in our Bill 21 challenge. You know, I said earlier that it is partly a government attempt to undermine Section 23 of the Charter, but we also have practical problems in our school board. We strive to graduate bilingual students, but it's increasingly difficult to find bilingual teachers. It has a huge impact on bilingual programs in this district. St. Gabriel is a bilingual school, Roslyn and a French immersion school. It's a challenge for principal of those schools to maintain the staff to keep up the standard of French immersion in their schools. With Bill 21, we would be able to hire French-speaking teachers who've been essentially banned from the teaching profession by the Quebec government. And in the decision by Judge Blanchard in Superior Court on Bill 21, he exempted English school boards. The EMSB took that case, but it applies to all English school boards. He exempted us from Bill 21, meaning that we would be free to hire bilingual teachers, even if they happen to wear a hijab. We tried to press ahead with that process. We ran into a bit of a hitch at the Quebec Court of Appeal. The Quebec Court of Appeal said, no, you can't begin to hire teachers. You really have to wait until the until the end of the legal procedures, and this could go to the Supreme Court of Canada. So we could be waiting for some time. I think that's just really one of the few downsides of the decision in the Superior Court on Bill 21. On Bill 40, Quebec is now the only jurisdiction in North America that has abolished democratically elected school boards. I have my own feelings about why they wanted to do that. I think that I know a lot of commissioners who were working in the French system. I know that there were a lot of PQ activists, and my suspicion has always been that that the CAC saw an opportunity to displace or kick out a lot of PQ activists from the political process, starting with school boards. It was tried, a similar effort was tried in New Zealand in the 80s, and a year or two ago, they declared that it was a failure, and they ended that in New Zealand. They had hundreds of public schools that were operated independently, ostensibly controlled by parents. What they found is that parents had no control whatsoever, and this was the same narrative that the CAC gave for Bill 40. But what we've seen across Quebec is basically chaos in the public school systems. At the largest public school board, the CSDM, now called the CS Service Center, Centre de Service, the parents resigned en masse from the new board of directors. They no longer have a council of commissioners. Meantime, at the EMSB, at the English School Board, the majority of elected people on our council of commissioners today happen to be parents. And so I think for the first time since I became a commissioner, parents do have a lot of control on the policy process. One thing we're doing is trying to streamline the policy process. We had a lot of problems with micromanagement by the council in the past. And so in using the bylaws that were left to us as a legacy by the trusteeship and adjusting them, which is what we're doing now. I'm chairman of the governance committee. That's a process that's ongoing. We're going to ensure that we bring the English School Board into 2022. A lot of the policies are antiquated and need to be changed. So just want to touch on Section 23 itself. Section 23, by the way, is the criteria. You'll hear more about it because it's the criteria that's being used by the CAC as the standard for delivering Anglo services, Quebec government services to the Anglophone community. They refer to it as the historic Anglo community. So they're using this Section 23 of the Charter, which essentially says, if your parents went to school in French anywhere in Canada, you can send your own kids to a linguistic minority school board. It applies to Francophones outside of Quebec, but it applies to Anglophones inside Quebec. But whether it's Bill 21 or Bill 40, we can see that even though one hand of the government is saying Section 23 or the similar criteria is great to deliver services, the other hand, is doing its best to try and erode and damage that very criteria. So it's kind of very strange times. And our role at the school board, I think, is to use all the means at our disposal, mostly legal, to defend Section 23 of the Charter. Now, one of the important things about Section 23 is that it's exempt from the notwithstanding clause. I always call it, explain it to parents. I say it's our kryptonite, it's our secret weapon, and it relates. It got a lot of its power through a decision at the Supreme Court of Canada back in '93, I believe, the Mahi case from Alberta, which applied to the Francophone linguistic minority community in Alberta. And the Supreme Court of Canada said that elected representatives of linguistic minority school boards have a right and an obligation to exercise management and control of their school boards. And this is a very, very powerful weapon that no province, no provincial government has been able to upend for decades. The CAC government has tried on many different occasions. My feeling is that essentially they've given up. It's embarrassing every time they lose a case to us. And unfortunately, they've moved on to their next scapegoat, which is CEGEP. So they've gone after Dawson College and punished the Anglophone community by taking away necessary infrastructure development. Dawson College, I'm not sure that Dawson College is protected by Section 23. Because outside of Quebec, kids go to school to grade 12. In Quebec, high school ends at 11, and then you go to college. So it's kind of a legal question about whether we could use Section 23 to defend Dawson College. And I haven't heard any lawyers venture any opinions on that, but I'm going to do my own research, as it were. But as I said before, Legault learned that we'll fight him aggressively, and he seems to have learned that lesson. And at the end of the COVID crisis, he had his hands full during the COVID crisis. Once that is over, will he come back at us? Hard to say. So today at the EMSB, at the English School Board, we have new management. Like I said before, we have parent control. We're working very hard on a new form of governance, which is really a conventional modern form of governance of whether it's a town council or a school board. The elected officials focus on debating and discussing policy. There's no micromanagement of the administrators. Their job is to open schools at 9 a.m. We can't interfere. So essentially, we set a new course for the school board. Our new bylaws will ensure that there's proper governance, and goes right back to what Glenn was saying about the Ligue d'Action Civique and their inspiration, the Charbonneau Commission. They want proper, a group of activists that think that good governance is good for the community. I'm on their side with that. One thing that's a little bit weird throughout this whole process is that our public meetings are now held on Zoom almost exclusively. And there have been a few lulls in during COVID where we tried to get back into the building and show that as elected officials that were there, we're taking our obligations and responsibilities seriously, but somehow we always end up back on Zoom. And I think that's true also for the Westmont Town Council. So the latest thing to come up really is Bill 96. I don't know if anyone followed the election. You probably saw the signs. On our signs, there was myself and Joe Ortona. We ran our election as Team Joe Ortona. I was the only commissioner up for election. So the premier decided to call a snap election. It was then delayed for almost a year. And then with very little notice, suddenly it was back on again. And that was at the end of August. And I had to get into gear very quickly to to run my election. And we did it in the context of a lot of noise around Bill 96. And there were different debates and discussions at the English School Board about Bill 96. And one of the things that people wanted to talk about the doors up and down the hills of Westmont was, is Quebec a nation? And what does it have to do with school boards? And what are you doing about it? And what are you doing about Bill 96? And what the hell is going on with Bill 21? And so I think I hit about 1,000 doors throughout the election period in Westmount. And it was very interesting. And, the way you run a school board election is essentially you go to as many doors as possible and you beg people to put on a mask and beg them to go vote. And enough people did, and I got reelected. I'm very grateful. We'll see what happens. I think that, in Bill 96 itself, I don't see a lot of opportunities for a school board to use its powers under Section 23 and its exemption from the notwithstanding clause. But I'll wait to hear from the lawyers on that. And I think that, the main thing that school boards can do in terms of Bill 96 is support other activists in our community. There's a new task force on Bill 96. It's a dynamic new group. I spent a lot of time talking to their executive members and giving them advice and hearing them out on what they think, how they think school boards should react. QCGN, I think, has been working really, really hard to make the voice of the community known on that issue. And we'll see. I mean, COVID has changed a lot of things in the sense that it soaked up a lot of energy in government institutions. And I haven't had time to play politics on a lot of different things, but that's going to change. And we're also going into a Quebec election. So it'll be an interesting rest of the year until the election in the fall. So that's all for now. I'm willing to entertain some questions.
Thank you very much, Julien. Are there any people that want to jump in, or do you want me to start this? I'm going to start it off then. I've got a couple of questions. I'll put them all together. Well, the first one, the Quebec Community Groups Network. How much involvement do you have with them now?
How much involvement do we have with them now? School boards are not members of QCGN, but insofar as elected officials are, community activists, I have a lot of contact with, personally, I'm speaking for myself, I have a lot of contact with people at QCGN. I know a lot of the members of the board of directors. I'm old friends with Jeffrey Chambers, the former president. I know Marlene Jennings obviously quite well. I'm friends with the Director General, Sylvia Martin-Laforge. And, I have to say that in the run up to the Bill 21 case, to give you an example, I didn't feel that English school boards were well prepared to deal with Section 23 issues, because we never really addressed Section 23 issues. As long as I've been a commissioner, I felt that it was kind of a sort of a shadow area that commission didn't really know a lot about. And I approached Jeffrey Chambers and Sylvie Martin-Laforge at the time and begged them for research help and to start some sort of a legal research project on the legal nature of Section 23 and how we could use it to protect school boards, because we knew CAC was likely to come in as a new government, and they've been saying for years they wanted to abolish school boards, and obviously they were going to come after English school boards. So how would we protect this old institution that goes back to the days of the B&A Act, even further, actually the 1840s, a long running institution that's been reorganized many times under different names, but effectively it's the same public school system that started out in small communities in the mid 19th century, and eventually we were taken over by events. We started this research project, but then and QCGN produced some legal studies, and the EMSB ended up hiring QCGN lawyers and went ahead with Power Law. Mark Power is a lawyer, very competent constitutional lawyer in Ottawa. And I give credit to QCGN for giving us the best law firm in the country to tackle this kind of issue.
As always, I have to unmute myself. Another question that I have is, I don't think anybody knows the name Jean-François Roberge. You don't hear a whole lot about him. He's the Minister of Education for the province of Quebec.
Yeah.
And we seem to hear more about Jalon Barrette and the whole French linguistics at the OLF and all that kind of stuff. Where does Roberge fit into this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. If you read the French media, they're disappointed by his performance as a minister. He's a school teacher by profession. He decided to go into politics. He's been a CAC member for a long time. I don't know. It's a huge challenge, and I think my belief on Roberge is that Bill 40 was an unnecessary law. That was the abolition law, and I believe fundamentally that the demands of this law, which is to make centralized decisions for 70-odd school boards, or centres de service as they're now called, has basically swallowed him whole. It's a huge challenge to oversee decision making, and the fundamental rule in public school systems in North America for almost 2 centuries has been local decision making, and the CAC, for, I think, as I mentioned before, perhaps for political reasons, had this great idea. It's an idea that originated with Dumont of the previous center right party. The CAC adopted it as their own, and they just kept repeating it for years until they came to government, and then felt they had to deliver and actually pass the law. They did, but now the demands on the ministry are huge. The minister, I just see the minister has sunk beneath the waves, and I'm sure he's working hard and working every day, but it's hard enough for a council of 10 or 15 people to run one school board, let alone one minister and his staff to run 75 school boards. So I predict that eventually Bill 40 will just fall by the wayside. It may have had a chance to work and give parents more power, and that was what Roberge promised. But the second it was implemented, the pandemic hit. And so, they had once in a century crisis that really tore apart Bill 40. And I think that it essentially self-destructed under COVID. And we'll see after the crisis ends whether or not they're able to save this law, but I doubt it. And I'm certainly grateful that that all elected people in the English public school system got together and fought it. So we're not, we did not subject our own communities to this dysfunction.
Thank you. Any questions? We're about done. My goodness, I'm surprised, actually.
I am willing to entertain questions on EMSB dysfunction, bad governance, trusteeship, any of those things that that the English School Board was criticized for in the past. Like I said, we were able to give ourselves a fresh start. with a much more saner look at governance, much more input by elected people and parents in particular, and more focus on having good senior administrators and letting them do their work, and focusing on modernizing our policies and make it look more like, for example, school board in Ottawa, or school board in Toronto, or school board in Chicago. So Quebec has a very dysfunctional public school system. It's a problem. It has one of the lowest graduation rates in North America. Part of the reason is that the Quebec government has never felt comfortable with the whole issue of local democracy. And that's, it's sometimes an ugly business, but it has stood the test of time across North America. Today we hear about weird things happening at school boards in the States, but that's kind of like a COVID thing. They'll get past those issues. But for those who don't know, because of the BNA Act, what they did is, as part of the Canadian Constitutional Compromise, they protected Catholic schools and Protestant schools. So in the 1860s, what happened is the church hierarchies got control of the public school systems in Quebec, and they didn't do a great job of working with their communities to contain the dropouts, to develop strong culture in public schools. And it was only with the Quiet Revolution in the 60s that started to change. And in the early 60s, the Quebec government did a report and said, hey, we have to move to an elected system. And so in the last 50 years, in fits and starts, the Quebec government tried to move to an elected system, but it always kind of pulled back, and it always, in some ways tried to obstruct local democracy. And then we arrive at the CAQ. And look, the Liberals also tried to mess with it a little bit themselves in previous years, and now we have completely wiped it away altogether. But the one thing we no longer talk about in the public school system is the dropout rate. And the dropout, the English School Board has a great graduation rate. It's comparable to what we have in Ontario, what we see in Ontario, but we also benefit from a better socioeconomic profile in our community. But in the French sector, they desperately need local democracy back in their system, and to give power to parents to work on the issues that keep the graduation rate at a low level. But meantime, at the English School Board, we're happy that we're the top in Quebec. We produce great graduates. We're a very important cog in the wheel of the Montreal economy. And that's why we get elected to these roles. And that's why we work hard to protect the system.
Good. We've got a couple of hands up here. Mike Cohen, you're first on the list. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted the opportunity to just say a few words and thank Julien. I was called by the Rotary, and it's a really nice opportunity because I just wanted to share that, yes, we are a school board, but we are almost really, I see working in this job for 23 years now, we're really like the representative of the English community. And whether you have a student, whether you have a child or a grandchild there, a lot of you are alumni of former PSBGM schools. We are the only board that stands up for the community. Our chair, Mr. Ortona, was running for Denny Coderre. And when the school board presented a motion against Bill 96, Denny Coderre threw him out of the party, when he had brought him in as a candidate, because he said, this is someone who's going to speak up for the Anglophones. Without even any warning, without him even calling him, had a secretary call him and say, you're out as a candidate. And we all know what happened to Denny Coderre. So they're all drinking the Kool-Aid of the CAQ. And sadly, for democracy, the CAQ will win the next election. You see the polls today, the Conservatives are actually the new Conservatives, because they're anti-vax, are coming up in the polls, and they may be the official opposition. They might even beat the Liberals. So it's very frightening. But I want to thank Mr. Feldman. I want to thank our council, and I will tell you I'll make it very brief that I was there for a year when we were under trusteeship, and the first 6 months were great. But then the last 6 months before the commissioners came back in, because they did not think that the English school boards were going to get an injunction to bring the commissioners back. What they did is they put them under trusteeship intentionally for 12 months so that trusteeship would end just before they could declare us a service center and put in their own people to run the board. And that didn't happen, but we're still waiting for the verdict on Bill 40. The case was last April. I don't know what is taking the judge so long. It's been 10 months, no verdict yet, but we're crossing our fingers and praying that we win the case and we maintain our democratically elected commissioners. So thanks for giving us this opportunity.
Yeah, if I could just, thank you, Michael. If I could just add to that, yeah, I forgot to mention that aspect of the election because I remember calling up Joe Hortona and just saying, okay, like, what do we do now? Because you know his face was on my election posters. I was running with Team Joe Hortona, as I'm proud to do, and suddenly we're faced with this crisis. And because if you recall, there were 3 elections going at the same time. There was the Montreal municipal election. There was Westmont municipal. There was the federal election going at the same time, and the National Assembly was throwing grenades at everybody, including the English Montreal School Board. At one time, they passed a unanimous motion against the school board, against me, against Joe Hortona. It was a bit of a crazy time, but what we did, we decided that okay, you want to make an issue of Bill 96. Okay, we're gonna set aside our plan to campaign on election issues. We're gonna campaign, if you want to campaign on cultural issues like Bill 96, we'll do that. And we're gonna show people exactly what we're doing to defend the public school system. And that's exactly what we did. And I think that's what, as I said, I met many people at their door. That's what they expected of us. And like I said, it's very difficult to run a school board campaign because people plan to vote in the federal election, the municipal election, and sometimes the school board election, they don't understand the issues, or they can't get on the list. The voters list has not been properly updated for 20 years because the government doesn't want to do it. We have a lot of voter suppression issues in the school board as well. So, as I said, I'm grateful that we jumped through all those hoops, and we're in a place now to defend the school board. One other thing about the trusteeship is that the second half, as Michael was referring to, we heard rumors that what the government planned to do was that they were going to fire all the commissioners who are under trusteeship and replace them with CAC appointees. And it was kind of a chilling prospect, and it was at a rumor stage, and it never, I never saw any paper or any, heard any official people in the government talking about it, but it was real, and it was a bit chilling that this government really doesn't respect democracy, and we have to be tough. Unfortunately, we have to be very tough with the government, and it's difficult because this is also the government that finances our system. They refuse to pay for air purifiers, for example. We spent $2 million. Who knows if they're ever going to reimburse us? But sometimes you wonder, how close are we to being in Dawson's situation where they just try and starve us financially? So there are still issues out there that concern us about this government.
We've got 2 more questions here. Malcolm McRae, would you care to step in?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I wasn't born in Quebec. I grew up in Ontario and I moved to Quebec after university. But I've always found the school board elections in this province, very mysterious as to how they're supposed to work. What defines who's on the electoral list? You know, whether you're on English school board or you formerly in the French one, I really never understood how that worked.
Well, okay, so let me tell you about the secret sauce.
Okay.
I've done quite a few school board elections at this point, and what you're saying is absolutely true. And I said, though, you know, as I said, there's a framework of voter suppression at work. There's a lot of gerrymandering of districts. These are all part of the past of toxic partisan politics at the English School Board, but they haven't been fixed by Quebec, and that it really is the responsibility of Elections Quebec to fix that. But when you have governments that are attacking the democratic system itself, obviously they don't have any incentive to fix anything at all. They don't really care. They as a government, what they really want is control. So Bill 40 reflects that they want control. They're not really that interested in the benefits of having local democracy at work. As the rest of North America benefits from it, we don't get the benefit of that. So we have this democratic deficit in Quebec. But as to the voters list, the only sure way to get on the voters list in school board elections is if you have a child in the school, because in the law, if you have a child registered at one of the local schools, the school board has to put you on the list. And so what I do as a candidate is I find who are the parents in the district. And how do I do that? Well, I can just go down the voters list and look at birth dates and make an educated guess about who's a parent. Because if they're new on the list, they're obviously there because they were put there by the English School Board. Other than that, the other people on the list, I develop issues and discussions that I have with people who are, 75 plus, age-wise. Why? Because they are still on the list because they had children in the English School Board, say 20, 30 years ago, and they're just still on the list. So between the younger parents and people who are probably grandparents at this point, there's like a huge, you can see that there's a huge gap of people who are not on the list and can't figure out how to get on the list. And when you're a candidate, you don't have time to try and get people onto the list. And when you read the rules and regulations about getting people on the list, the main thing that they tell you is that, okay, so you have to go down to the school board, fight your way into the building because there's a guard, and it's COVID, and they're not letting people in the building, and most people are working from home, and all those kinds of barriers. People just throw up their hands and they give up. So the result is that the majority of people who want to vote can vote, and the government doesn't care. The government is tired of elections. They don't like them. Democracy is an annoyance for them. So you just have to, one point I neglected to mention earlier is I said that the government played a lot of games about elections. They put the elections on and they put them off and on and off. They did that 4 times, and then they postponed them for a year. So the government itself is trolling the English school boards by playing games with their elections. But throughout that period, I had a lot of time to think about it, and it occurred to me that control of our elections is really part of Section 23 of the Charter that I spoke about earlier. And another election is the government also postpones elections whenever they want. But I think it's important to have elections regularly so people understand what school board elections are, just the way it's done in the rest of North America. And I think that eventually we'll do something to take control of our own election system as part of our management and control mandate, originally from the Supreme Court under Section 23 of the Charter. There shouldn't be some guy in a cubicle in the minister's office or in the premier's office laughing about how he's pulling the puppet strings over elections in the English School Board. That's completely wrong. And it's very disturbing if you think about it, that in a democratic jurisdiction like Quebec, that people would actually do these kinds of things with respect to elections. So it will stop, but it requires people who are elected to take action, because taking action isn't always the thing that you have time for.
So does that mean that anybody who's an eligible voter in other elections can go to their local school board and say they'd like to be on the voter list?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in Quebec, and this goes back to probably 1980 referendum, 1995 referendums, there was always a lot of controversy about who was allowed to vote and who was not allowed to vote. Eventually, what Quebec did is they set up a single voter list that they maintain. And I don't know where they get the names from, maybe from tax records or healthcare records. Everyone has a health card. But the English School Board list is a subset of that list. And it's of no interest to the Quebec government to maintain that list, so they don't. So, for years I've said at the school board, we should enumerate our own communities, the old fashioned style where, if you had the federal election, people would go door to door and definitively get people's name on a list. If you're living in Westmont, NDG, Montreal West, Point St. Charles, there are a lot of Anglophones who do want to vote, but the energy that they're asked to get their name on a list is absurd at this point.
Julien, I'm just going to make a quick, this might help Malcolm also, and I'll do this very quickly. On the Elections Quebec site, am I eligible to vote? You have to be 18 years of old, a Canadian citizen. You have to have a domicile in the territory of the English Language School Board, and either have a child admitted to the English Language School Board, or if you don't have a child, you can opt to be entered on the list of electors of an English Language School Board. In other words, as Julien said, you just go and you say, I want to be on it.
But, in reality, of course, 5 people a year do that, because they're, the government is out there, with anti-school board propaganda. They take over school boards. They do everything possible to suppress any kind of vote, up into including abolishing elections. So, some people do want to do their civic duty, of course, and that's, the rules are that you could go to the school board. Presumably, Michael would, I think you can get in the door, at least to the guard desk nowadays, and I'm sure they're very helpful people there that would help anyone who wants to do that. But it's a challenge for sure.
We're running quite late here, so I want to throw the last question to Deborah.
A quick question. You mentioned that you're having difficulty finding bilingual and French immersion teachers. Do you have a plan, and how do you see that going forward?
Yeah, well, going back several years, the plan was, a big part of the plan was challenging Bill 21. But as you can see, that is a kind of a long-term plan, because the government is going to put sticks in the spokes every step of the way. Part of the issue is structural, in that before COVID, we had a very strong economy, and people weren't going into the teaching profession in Quebec because the salaries are not as good as what you can find in the private sector, in the tech sector, particularly, especially at this time when opportunities for women are opening up in the tech sector. The school system is maybe not as exciting. It's more of a traditional vocation for a lot of individuals. My mother was a school teacher and a principal. She's 85. She's still still at it as an education activist, taught me a lot of what I know about the public school systems. But yeah, I don't know a lot of people like my mother. I don't know a lot of people like that today. I do meet them at, of course, at the English School Board, but there's a shortage of them. And baby boomers are starting to retire. It's a big issue. And you know, I with parents and governing boards at schools like St. Gabriel and Westmont Park and Roslyn, every meeting I get parents to talk about it and discuss it, and have them discuss with the principal, you know, what strategies, because every school is a little bit different. You know, just to give you a quick example, a couple of years ago, I worked with the principal at St. Gabriel, and they wanted more bilingualism to it. They wanted more bilingualism in their classes to attract more families in the south end of the district in Point St. Charles. But how are they going to do it? Well, one good thing that the CAC did is they brought in universal pre-K, which is very popular among conservative movements in the US. So this is one thing that the CAC kind of copied from Republican red states. This pre-K, which is very popular in rural areas in red states. So the CAC thought this was a great idea. So what we did at St. Gabriel is we brought in 2 pre-kindergartens, and one or both of them are now French immersion, not just bilingual, but French immersion. So the kids are you know, being acclimatized in French right from the get-go. It's very, very important to parents. They want their kids to stay in Quebec and be completely bilingual. They know they have to start early. So it's very, very, you know, probably one of the biggest issues among parents of the English School Board. And, but it's only because at St. Gabriel, it's only because bilingual teachers were already in the school and they could adapt. They could adapt to the needs of the community, and they did so. But you know, what happens if you're a Roslyn and that's your entire vocation, and then a teacher retires? You know, where do you find the next teacher?
Have you thought of looking outside the province for French immersion?
No, look, Mike Cohen is here. He can tell you about all the efforts and programs and recruitment drives and everything that the administrators have done at the English School Board to beat the bushes for you know, for teachers. I'm not sure he's still here.
No, he's left.
Oh, he's left.
I'm gonna cut it.
But yeah, they have
time.
every trick in the book.
I'm just asking because my sister and her husband are both from Manitoba, and they were both French immersion teachers. They're now
Yeah.
retired, but they were in Manitoba because there was a lot of French immersion and the whole population.
You should, you know, they should give them a call. I'm sure they would.
Now they're in
You know, the
Peak.
Quebec government opened the door. They were so worried about the teacher shortage. They even said, well, you know, if there's a real shortage, well, maybe parents should start volunteering. That's what they said a few weeks back.
Okay, I'm gonna cut us off here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julien. But I think we could probably go on all afternoon. It's there's so many gray areas and there's so many things about the school boards and their functioning that so many of us don't know about or haven't been able to grasp, I guess, over the years. And maybe part of that is our fault for not taking a greater interest in it. You see that in the number of people that they go out to vote, you know. But it's good to have somebody come in and jiggle us a little bit, shake the tree, and remind us of some of the major issues that are out there that we're facing.
No, just very, very quickly. We don't we operate our budget, by the way, is 300 million. We don't have to work on sidewalks or sewers. But one infrastructure thing that we accomplished in this district is a complete renovation of Westmont Park School. It's a part of the heritage public infrastructure in Westmount. I'm very proud of the work that was done by the school board's project management and the contractor. You know, when if anyone went to that school, I don't know if anyone here went to Westmont Park, and it was once upon a time a high school. It has a beautiful 1930s Art Deco auditorium that was preserved by the contractors intact, including the marks and people carving their names on chairs. And I'm hoping that when COVID is ended, that it can be used frequently as a for public use, as a public gathering place, so people can get to see that. Thank you.
Thanks again, Julien.